So I feel like at the end of a show like this, it's just one question you need to ask yourself. What do you believe? And are you prepared to meet it? American Gods, Season 1, at the very least. Obviously, I am behind on this. I have not caught the show up to this point, but I was commissioned to review it. It's been on my to-do list for a while, but like so many things that have been on my to-do list for a while, the best way to get me to get around to them is for somebody to pay me to do it. And they have done. And I am... I was really happy with this. So, I am only going to be talking about Season 1. It's been out for a little while, so I am going to talk spoilers pretty freely. So, be warned in that case. If you yourself have not yet seen it and you intend to, I recommend it, and that's kind of where I have to leave it. So, I have read the novel, American Gods. It was a while ago. And my memories of it are a little patchy. It's more impressions and a couple of key moments. I don't remember it top to bottom. It's not one of my favorite Gaiman books. I think largely because it has sort of that travelogue feel to it, because it is a road trip, a big chunk of it. And while that gives you lots of opportunities to meet all these different gods and have all these different locations and encounters, it does give it a less of a narrative flow. It felt more like a novel-length exploration of a urban fantasy world than it felt like a proper narrative sometimes. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, and it's something you can generally get away with in a novel more than you certainly could in, say, a film. So I still think it works, but for things, as far as like an actual story, I actually vastly prefer Anansi Boys, which is the semi-follow-up sort of thing. But I definitely love the concept of American Gods. I've always loved the concept, and I do like a fair number of the characters. So I was really interested, and especially knowing that Bryan Fuller was involved behind the scenes. The other, Michael Green, the other showrunner for the first season, has also done good work, but he's, primarily was a writer for things that always felt very director-driven. And, because I'm more familiar with his film work than his TV work. But Bryan Fuller, the guy behind Hannibal, that's a solid fit. I want to see that. And boy, am I glad I saw that. So, boy, where do we begin? If you haven't read the book, I'm not going to say you can't get enjoyment out of this, but you are going to be in for a massive head trip. Having the book is a little bit like having a cheat sheet. It's not exactly like knowing exactly what's going to happen, because there are parts that have been expanded, parts that go in different directions, whole new characters who aren't even in the book at all. So there's still plenty new for you, but you have your feet under you because you know the premise. You know what's going on ish as a general sense of the world. Whereas you come into this cold, you got to be prepared to do some work to wrap your head around this. And I'd like to imagine that if that had been me and I hadn't read the book first, that I probably would have had fun doing that. But even as someone who's read the book, I'm just enjoying watching all these things just be so fully embodied by, first of all, the cast. Wow, this is an amazing cast. I mean, it's probably to their benefit that some of the parts are played by much bigger actors than you would have expected, largely because they have fairly short appearances in maybe 2 out of 8 episodes, or maybe 4, but they're not in every episode, and their scenes are fairly isolated. That's how you end up with getting people like Gillian Anderson and Peter Stormare and Crispin Glover for relatively short parts, but the presence of those kinds of people across the thing, that just gives a nice vibe. Kristen Chenoweth, there's another one. That just gives a really nice vibe to the thing overall that's just really enjoyable. And then Oh, boy. I know a character I was going to start talking about. Or hold up. We're going to stick a pin in him. We'll come back to him. I want to build him. Let's talk about Shadow for a bit. My memory of Shadow from the book is very half-formed. I don't have a very strong sense of him. And I don't know if this is just me or if other people find this. I actually tend to find, more often than not, I find a hard time feeling that narrators or characters whose we get inside their heads, I have a hard time feeling the characterization for them often versus other characters. And that was the case a little bit for him. Because like I've talked to some people, and some people had a much more fully formed sense of who Shadow was than I remember him being. In my mind, he was a little bit of a blank slate is an overstatement, but he was very malleable, and he was by far the most normal thing and person in most of the situations he was in, which made him the POV, the fish out of water, but also made him comparatively the boring one. So Shadow in the book never left much of an impression on me. Shadow in the show works better, though. And I think a lot of that just has to do with the injection of personality that a charismatic actor brings just by simply standing there. You cast a role like that well, and suddenly just looking at somebody and saying one line, I got more personality off Shadow than I did for probably multiple chapters worth of the book, just because of what an actor can convey with so little screen time if they're really good for the part, which he definitely is. Laura is an interesting character for me to talk about because she is a character, and again, not having read the book in a while, I don't know how much of this is alterations done to the character from the novel to the show, and how much of this is just me being older and having a better grasp on the kind of character she is. But I got Laura way better here than I did in the book. In the book, she was just kind of there. I actually had kind of forgotten she was for a bit until the show started and like she first got introduced. I'm like, that's right, she's going to come back. But I had kind of forgotten. That hadn't stuck with me as much. And I don't think I got Laura as a character, but if the show is representative of her, then she's the kind of character that I wouldn't have gotten at a younger age. You know, I wouldn't have understood Laura, who she was, what she's about, reading it over 10 years ago, which was when I did. So that, watching it now, I really appreciate the depth of Laura. There is a lot to her. There's a lot going on with her, and there's a lot that has to be conveyed because she's kind of a horrible person, and she's not fun horrible. That's Mad Sweeney. We'll get to him. She's not a fun kind of, a little bit of a horrible person. She is a damaged kind of person. And yet, I still really enjoyed her. I enjoyed her presence. I wanted her around. I wanted good things for her, even though I'm not sure she deserved any of them. It's a really tough balance to have a character be someone who you root for, but who's not a good person, but isn't like the fun, chaotic kind of not good person. That's tough to pull off. That's tough to write. That's tough to perform. That was really, really well done across the board for her. Since I mentioned him, Mad Sweeney. Mad Sweeney is such a small part of the book. Actually, I've watched some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, and they basically admitted to the fact that once they cast this actor, they expanded the part, like, we gotta do more with him. Oh boy, am I glad they did. Especially pairing him off with Laura, which, the two of them in a scene, these two terrible people, just winding each other up. Oh, it's great. And he's got such terrific presence. He's just so over everything. Or at least he wants to be over everything. You get the sense that he's the kind of person that if you were to ask him, he'd say, nah, I don't care about anything. I don't care about anybody. I'm only out for myself. Heck with everything. That's what he'd tell you. And that's probably what he wishes were true. But it's not. And that, I think, annoys him because it probably makes his life more difficult. That's the vibe I got off him, and I enjoyed the heck out of it. I like how ticked off he is at everything. So he was a lot of fun. I enjoyed him a lot. I liked the expansion out from the scene of the djinn, which, first of all, that was a gorgeous scene. That was a wonderful, beautiful scene. That could have been super exploitative. Actually, the show as a whole has a number of characters who could be super exploitative. I don't feel any of them were. I don't make that call for other people. But that is one of them. And that worked. That worked really well. I loved the pace of that scene. I loved it that it slowed down and we got that nice prolonged scene of those two men together. That was great. That was really great. But the character who I stuck a pin in, who I said I would come back to, Ian Mcshane. Could there be a more perfect Wednesday than Ian Mcshane? I don't think so. He is gruff, yet charming. He can appear like he can almost fade into the background sometimes and seem innocuous, but there's always this sense of power behind him. And he can do so much with just a look and a quickly rattled off line. But then he can also turn on a dime when he wants to. Ian McShane's just great in general, but he is so good for this part. Holy crap. And the thing is, really, honestly, so much of the appeal of this. I mean, Wednesday was a character who I remember better than I think almost anybody else. And if this show was going to work at all, it needed a Wednesday who you could believe in, who you could believe had that much history, who you could believe had that much power, who you could believe was that wily. And Ian McShane, I believe it. I believe it 100%. Oh my God, it's so good. Honestly, and this is a rarity for me, if you've been around this channel for a while, I don't really have any complaints to make about this. As an adaptation, I think it's amazing. I suppose, I would say some of the added material, it's not bad, but I think some of the weaker stuff. So, the stop off with Vulcan, that's new. That's completely new, and that wasn't in the book. And it's okay. It feels a little more on the nose. It feels a little bit less nuanced than a lot of the other stuff does. On the other hand, the stuff at the end with Easter, that was great. And the way so much of that goes, that's all new. And so that was terrific. Dug the heck out of that. I almost forgot to bring up. Talk about an actor who I would not have thought to cast in this part, but was perfect. Orlando Jones as Anansi. I know it's Mr. Nancy, but I can't help but think of him as Anansi because that's the god he's portraying. Oh, he was so good. Especially first episode he's in. The flashback, origin-y kind of thing where he's firing up these slaves in the hold of a ship. He went from suave to a little bit silly even to dark and cold and angry, and yet keeping that vibe of let's make this a good story. I've actually thought for a long time that Orlando Jones was an underutilized, underrated actor. And I feel really nice to be validated on that. Because, he's really good. Like I said, no major complaints. Just tiny things. Maybe that wasn't the strongest bit of this. But I'll tell you what I am nervous, though. Because I wasn't just commissioned for season 1. I was also commissioned for season 2. And I know that season 2 had a very, very troubled development. And it had a different showrunner who was fired. And then it had a different set of showrunners. and they had less money to work with because the first season went over budget, which, looking at it, I believe, something looks this stunning, I'm not shocked that it went over budget. But I'm nervous to see season 2, especially after such a astounding splash of a debut that this is. I enjoyed the heck out of this. It is wonderful and bizarre, and you just kind of sink into it as a world, and you just get to dwell in this space, and it's awesome, and I am so scared to see a second season because I do not want to see this fall apart. We'll see what happens. That'll be out next week. Wish me luck. And American Gods Season 1. Have you seen it? What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something on down in the comments. Let's talk about it. And until next time, this council is adjourned. Thanks for sticking all the way through and for tuning in. There's all the usual stuff you can do to help me out and keep the channel growing and appease the almighty algorithm, for we must all worship those of us on YouTube. So you can like, subscribe, hit the bell, leave a comment. Also, I naturally have a Patreon, and there's going to be a link for that at the end here. There's one down in the description. And these lovely names you're now seeing go past you, they help keep this channel going. Your name could be among them, but you also don't have to do any of it, because at the end of the day, you are the council. I just run the meetings. Does that mean that I worship you?